The poison was never meant for Elder Feng. It was meant for me. I'd been in this body 3 seconds, already confessed to a crime, in front of the one person trying to execute me. In the book I attack him here. I lose. Chapter 1, I've read this story. I know exactly how she dies, so I didn't attack. There's a real poisoner. Everyone thinks it's me. The tribunal is in 8 hours, and the villain, the actual villain, just walked past my window. I'm not running. I want to be very clear about that.
The words were already coming out of my mouth before I understood I had a mouth. The poison was never meant for Elder Feng. It was meant for me. Silence. The kind that happens when 50 people all stop breathing at the same moment. I blinked. Bright courtyard. Stone floor. Rows of sect disciples in gray robes, all staring at me like I just said something in a language nobody spoke. One young man, sword at his hip, jaw tight, halfway through a sentence he'd clearly abandoned, was looking at me like he was reconsidering something he'd been very sure about. Then I looked down at my hands. Long, elegant fingers. Silk sleeve. Embroidery that probably cost more than my entire last apartment. Not my hands. What I said. And the voice that came out wasn't mine. Low. Cold. The kind of voice that made people check their exits. Great. So here's the situation. I was reading a novel. 2 a.m, phone under the covers, very invested. The villain girl had just been publicly accused in Chapter 1, and I was thinking, wow, she's really going to die, that's so tragic, when my battery hit 0. And then I hit whatever comes after 0. Now I'm here. Kingshan Sword Sect. Inner courtyard. And based on the 50-odd faces staring at me, I've been mid-speech for at least 20 seconds before I showed up. I woke up inside a novel. This is Chapter 1. Here's what's supposed to happen. Yan Bei, that's me, apparently, attacks the hero, confirms every accusation with her own fists, and begins a 37-chapter countdown to her own execution. Here's what I'm going to do instead, survive. The young man who'd been mid-sentence before I interrupted myself, that was Shen Yao. I recognized the description. Hero. Sword prodigy. Utterly devoted to Elder Feng, the Grand Elder currently dying from spirit poison in his chambers. Shen Yao had spent 3 pages in Chapter 1 building to a very satisfying accusation, and now he was staring at me like I'd answered the wrong question. Which I had. Obviously. Because Yan Bei wasn't supposed to say the poison was meant for her. Yan Bei was supposed to rage and attack and make everything worse, right on schedule. I had no idea what I'd said before I arrived. I'd woken up mid-sentence. Anything could have been coming out of my mouth, but I knew what Chapter 1 needed me to do next. The novel was very clear. Attack. Draw first. Make it undeniable. So I took 1 step back. One person in the crowd inhaled sharply. Just one. But in that silence, it was very loud. Shen Yao's expression did something I hadn't expected. It didn't sharpen, it confused. His hand was near his hilt, but not quite on it. Yan Bei backing down wasn't a de-escalation he knew how to read. Yan Bei never backed down. I needed to think. I had 37 chapters before the ending I didn't want. Elder Feng was still alive. I had a window, a narrow one, before Chapter 20 closed it. The tribunal wasn't announced yet. 10 days. The math was terrifying, but it existed, which was more than I had 30 seconds ago. I just needed to not start a fight in the next 30 seconds. What? Said Shen Yao. Not an accusation this time. An actual question. Like he was revising. I didn't answer. Answering felt dangerous. I had no idea what the first half of my sentence had been. The silence held another 3 seconds, long enough for the crowd to register that Yan Bei was still standing there, doing nothing. Then Shen Yao's hand moved. Deliberately, slowly, the hilt cleared the scabbard with a clean metallic whisper. Yan Bei, his voice had gone carefully precise in the way that meant he was working something out in real time. What exactly did you just say about the poison? I looked at the sword. Half drawn, catching courtyard light. Here's the thing I hadn't accounted for. Stepping back, saying nothing, not attacking, it hadn't calmed him down. It had made him more suspicious. Because whoever he'd been prepared to face, it wasn't someone who stepped back and went quiet. He was going to need an answer. I had 37 chapters, 10 days, and one very good reason not to speak. The sword finished clearing the scabbard.
He sheathed the sword. That was the moment I understood. I had absolutely no idea what happened next. In the novel, the version I read twice, the one I had practically memorized, Yan Bei drew first, and the entire courtyard erupted. There was a duel. There was blood. There was a very satisfying scene where Shen Yao declared her a threat to the sect, and half the disciples cheered. That was Chapter 1. That was what Chapter 1 was. I had stepped back instead. Hands open. And now, Shen Yao was standing 3 feet away, with his sword sheathed, and an expression I had never seen on his face, in any illustrated summary or fan adaptation. It was somewhere between confused and personally offended. The novel had no word for it. I was improvising. The disciples scattered in the way that crowds scatter when they desperately want to discuss something, but not within earshot of the people they want to discuss. Within 2 minutes, the courtyard was almost empty. Almost. 2 outer disciples were still technically sweeping the far end of the flagstones, except their brooms had stopped moving, and they were staring at me with their mouths slightly open. I walked past them at my coldest Yan Bei stride. Spine straight. Chin level. The full performance. Inside, I was narrating at emergency speed. Okay, nobody attacked me. That's good. The sword went back in. Also good. Shen Yao looked thrown, which was interesting, because in the novel, Shen Yao was never thrown by anything. He had 2 speeds, righteous certainty and righteous fury. What I had just produced in him was a 3rd speed, and it had no name yet. I needed to figure out what it meant before he did. The whispers started before I reached the inner gate. She said something about poison. Did you hear that? She said the elder was poisoned. Yan Bei doesn't. She wouldn't. Why would she say that? Because she's lying, obviously. It's another move. She's trying to seem like she's helping so she can... I stopped walking. The 2 disciples shut up instantly. I turned around very slowly, with the full, cold weight of the body I was inhabiting, and I looked at them for exactly 4 seconds. Then I turned back and kept walking. My hands were shaking inside my sleeves. The villain mask was holding, but barely, and it was doing nothing for my cardiovascular system. Here is the thing about inhabiting a villain's body. Everyone already knows your motivation. They have decided. Your deviation from the script doesn't read as character growth. It reads as a more sophisticated scheme. Every kind thing I did made me more suspicious, not less. The more I acted like a person, the more they looked for the angle. Shen Yao was looking for the angle right now. I could feel it from 20 meters away. I kept walking. She appeared at the East Corridor intersection. Not from around the corner, she had been standing there. Still, waiting. Su Mei. In the novel, she was described as having the sweetest face in 3 provinces, and the novel was not exaggerating. Everything about her was arranged into softness. The loose braid, the pale robes, the way she tilted her head when she was about to say something gentle. Yan Bei. Her voice was warm, concerned, precisely calibrated. Are you all right? That was. I worried for you, just now. I had read enough of the novel to know what she was supposed to be. Earnest. Good. The female lead who balanced Shen Yao's fire with her steadiness. The one character in the story who was actually decent. I was watching her hands, because here is what I had also noticed. Standing in that courtyard with a sword at my throat, Su Mei had been 4 positions away from me in the crowd. She was not fast. She was not a close combat disciple. She had no reason to be standing inside my personal space within a minute of Shen Yao sheathing his sword. And yet, Shen Yao had sheathed the sword. There had been approximately 0.3 seconds of crowd stillness. And then Su Mei had moved. Not fast, that would have been obvious. Just efficient. The way someone moves when they already know where they're going, before the situation resolves. In the novel, she appeared at this junction because she had been looking for MC to check on her. Sweet. Concerned. That was the explanation. I was standing in front of her actual face, and the explanation did not fit. I'm fine, I said. The villain mask delivered it flat and clipped, which was probably rude, but I needed her to stop looking at me with those precisely calibrated eyes. Of course, she smiled. The smile reached her eyes. It was a very good smile. If you need anything, I'm here. She stepped back, yielded the corridor. I walked through it. I did not look back, but I counted her footsteps behind me until they faded, and they faded too slowly for someone who had already said what they came to say. The chapter clock hadn't updated. In the novel, chapter 1 ended with a duel. We had no duel. The chapter counter was still blinking on something that hadn't resolved into a number, and I was starting to understand that the resolution I had been counting on, that clean sequence of events, that familiar track, was already gone. The plot had deviated. Shen Yao had noticed. Su Mei had noticed faster. And somewhere behind me, without turning around, I had the very specific feeling that I was being watched by someone who had been watching me since before I arrived. The fist came at my face, and my body moved. That's not a metaphor. My body, this body, Yan Bei's body, the one I've been trapped inside for 2 chapters now, simply reacted. Weight shifted. Hip rotated. Palm struck something solid, and the world spun sideways for half a second, before I was standing, breathing hard, staring at the junior disciple on the ground. He looked up at me with wide eyes. Blood dripped from his nose. I started. You know what's funny? I don't know what I did. My hands were in the right position like I'd worn these moves before, but there's no file in my head called martial arts. I woke up in a novel, not a kung fu movie. Yan Bei, the junior disciple choked out, wiping his face with trembling fingers. I didn't mean, I was just. He was apologizing. To me, the woman who was supposed to beat him into the dirt for the crime of existing in my peripheral vision. Get up, I thought. Humiliate him. That's what Yan Bei would do. That's what's written. My legs didn't move. The training grounds of the Yun sect spread out behind me like a particularly judgmental postcard. 40, maybe 50 disciples in matching grey robes, all pretending not to watch the spectacle I'd accidentally created. Sparring pairs circled each other in the morning heat, while senior instructors barked corrections from the shade. And Shen Yao was standing on the observation platform. Right. He'd been there when I'd walked in. I'd hoped he was just passing through, a minor plot NPC, wandering off to his next scene. But no. The male lead was watching training, like it was a sport he followed, like he had nothing better to do than study the Villainess's every move. Which, okay, he did. Investigating me was literally his plot function. But did he have to be so thorough about it? "Gee, your stance was wrong," I said to the junior disciple on the ground, because apparently my mouth was operating independently of my brain now. The weight goes on the back foot for that strike. "You'll hurt your shoulder." He stared at me. I stared at me. What was I doing? "Thank you," he whispered, and scrambled upright, with a bow so deep his forehead nearly touched his knees. "Thank you, Yan Bei." He ran off before I could explain that I wasn't being kind, I was being confused, and those are very different things. The other disciples watched him go. Then they looked at me. Then they looked at each other. "What is she playing at?" their faces said. "This isn't in the script. You know what? I was wondering the same thing." Sect disciple Yan Bei, the senior instructor's voice cut across the yard. "Your form was acceptable. Pair with Jiang Xin next." Jiang Xin was the girl who'd been smirking at me when I walked in. The one whose internal monologue I'd accidentally caught in Chapter 1, something about how the outer disciples should know their place, yada yada, standard villainesses inheriting the earth. She stepped forward with the enthusiasm of someone about to watch me eat dirt. "Please, don't let me accidentally win this one," I thought. "Please, let my body just be normal and untalented and..." Jiang Xin threw a kick at my head. My arm came up, blocked it, counterstruck without conscious thought. Her shoulder popped under my palm and she stumbled, surprised, angry, afraid. "I yield," she gasped. I hadn't even touched her that hard. "Stop doing that," I told my body. "You are the villain." Act like it. My body, apparently, had other plans. Training ended at noon. I was sweating, actual physical sweat, which was new because apparently cultivation bodies still had basic biological functions, and my shoulders ached in ways that suggested I'd been doing this fighting thing for years without consulting my brain about it. Muscle memory. That was the phrase, right? The Yan Bei I'm replacing. She trained in this courtyard. Daily, probably, for years. Her body knows moves I've never learned. When someone swings at me, this body just handles it, which would be useful if I understood what was happening. Instead, I felt like a passenger in a car driven by a ghost who'd taken a left turn at Albuquerque. "Yan Bei," I turned. Shen Yao was walking toward me across the empty training grounds, his white robes catching the midday light, like a character illustration. The male lead in his natural habitat, pursuing the villainess through a dramatic slow walk. "That's a new stance," he said. His voice was calm, controlled, the voice of a man building a case. "I don't know what you mean." I made my face do the cold thing, the imperious thing. It was getting easier. "I've always trained this way. You helped that junior disciple up. He fell. You taught Jiang Xin proper form. She was fighting wrong for months, and you fixed it in one exchange. I hadn't realized that." Huh. Jiang Xin had been compensation swinging, like someone who'd learned from a book rather than a master. And apparently, I just corrected her, without thinking. "Stop doing that," I thought again, desperate now. That's not villain behavior. Villains don't help. Villains don't teach. Villains destroy and manipulate and look fabulous doing it. He was being annoying, I said. I wanted him to stop annoying me. "That counts as villainous, right?" Shen Yao's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes, a recalibration, like a man adjusting his assessment of a chess opponent. The Yan Bei I investigated, he said slowly, would have left him bleeding in the dirt. She wouldn't have cared about his shoulder. She wouldn't have corrected Jiang Xin's form. Maybe I've grown as a person. Maybe you've changed in ways that don't fit what I was told about you. The afternoon sun was warm on my back. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang. The change of watch, maybe, or lunch, or whatever timekeeping system they had in this sect. I didn't know what to say to that. Shen Yao was looking at me like he was solving a puzzle, and the worst part was that I couldn't tell if he was getting closer to the answer or further away. You should go, I said. I need to meditate on my crimes, or whatever. He didn't move. The real poisoner is still out there, he said. Elder Feng is still dying. Every day you don't confess, more people get hurt. I didn't poison anyone, I know. He said it simply, quietly. And that was somehow worse than the accusations. I know, he repeated. That doesn't make sense to me either. He turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the training yard with the ghost of his words and the weight of my own body. A body that kept betraying me in directions I didn't choose. Stop doing that, I thought, one last time. My hands didn't answer. I found Mao Lin that evening, in the servant corridors where the torchlight was dim and the walls remembered whispers. You looked different today, he said. In the training ground. Different how? Like her, he said. The old Yan Bei. But not. Like someone wearing her face and forgetting the lines. I should have denied it. Should have threatened him, reminded him of his place, done the cold villain thing that was supposed to be my default. Instead, I said, what if I told you I don't know what lines I'm supposed to say anymore? Mao Lin studied me for a long moment. His eyes were dark in the poor light, and there was something in them I hadn't seen before, not the bitter resentment of a man who'd been dismissed, but something almost like curiosity. Then I'd say you should find out, he said, before someone else decides the script for you. He slipped away into the shadows, and I was left alone in the corridor, with the echo of his words and the certain, creeping knowledge that something was changing. In me, around me, in the story I was supposed to be destroying, just by existing in it. Tomorrow, Elder Feng would wake for a single sentence before falling back into silence. The diary would appear in my room like a gift and a curse. The chapter clock would tick forward, but tonight, I just stood there, trying to remember how to be the villain when my body kept insisting on being something else. Stop doing that, I thought. But maybe, just maybe, I didn't want to stop. It was waiting for me when I returned to the quarters. Not hidden, not concealed, just there. On the low table beside my bed, where I could almost pretend it had been waiting patiently, like a letter from a stranger who already knew I'd come back to this room eventually. Bound in faded blue cloth, the edges soft with age, the pages thick and slightly yellowed. A diary. The original Yan Bei's diary. You need to understand how I know this isn't a trap. Because part of me, the part that's been living in terror for 3 chapters now, fully expected it to be poisoned, sprinkled with something that would finish what Elder Feng's poison started. I stood in the doorway for a full minute, heart pounding, running through every thriller I'd ever watched. Don't touch the unexpected object. Don't open the mysterious package. Don't be the idiot in the horror movie. But it wasn't a trap. I knew it the way you know things in this body. Some instinct that isn't mine, some muscle memory of fingers that held this same cloth, turned these same pages. Yan Bei kept a diary. I never found it in the novel, which means either it was insignificant or it was never supposed to matter. Tonight, it matters. I lit a single candle, sat on the edge of the bed, and I opened it. The handwriting was precise, elegant even, the kind of penmanship that came from years of being told you were someone important, someone whose words deserved to look beautiful. The first entries were dated 3 years back, full of the small irritations of a young noblewoman, rivals in the inner circle, tedious ceremonies, the endless politics of the sect. I skimmed them, looking for the things that would tell me who she really was. But as the entries progressed, something else emerged. Elder Feng praised Junior Sister Su Mei's sword form today. She is improving rapidly. I stood beside him as he watched her, and I thought, he has never looked at me that way. Not once. Not in 3 years of being his disciple. I am his successor by blood, by rank, by everything, but he looks at her like she is the future. I paused. Read it again. This wasn't the villain the novel described. This wasn't the cold, calculating Yan Bei who poisoned her master out of ambition. This was someone who was afraid. Someone who watched a younger disciple receive the approval she desperately wanted and felt herself being replaced. Shen Yao passed me in the courtyard today. He did not bow. He never does. He believes I am unworthy of the gesture. I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice would not come. I stood there like a fool, watching him walk away, and I thought, this is what it is to love someone who will never see you. Oh no. Oh no. She loved Shen Yao. The male lead of the novel, the man who was supposed to destroy her, was the object of her affection. And in the novel, she never once showed it. She played the villain, schemed against everyone, and died with her cruelty as her only legacy. But here, in these pages, she was just a woman. A lonely, frightened woman who loved a man who hated her. I turned more pages. The entries grew shorter, more frantic. Dated in the weeks before the poisoning. They are pressing me. They say it must be done, that there is no other way. They say Elder Feng grows too weak to lead, that the sect needs someone stronger at the helm. They say it is my duty. I do not want this. I have never wanted this. But if I refuse, they say my brother will suffer for it. They say there are ways to make me comply that I cannot imagine. I went to Elder Feng tonight. I tried to tell him, but he looked at me with such trust, such belief that I would protect the sect after him, and the words would not come. How do you tell a man who believes in you that you are not strong enough to save yourself? My hands were shaking. This wasn't in the novel. None of this was in the novel. The Yan Bei in the book was a stock villain, evil because the plot required evil, destroyed because the hero needed something to overcome. She didn't have a story. She was just an obstacle. But these pages, this fear, this desperate, drowning loneliness, this was a person. And then I found the last entry. Dated the night before Elder Feng collapsed. Tonight, I will go to him and beg forgiveness. I cannot do this thing they want me to do. Whatever they threaten, whatever they promise, I will tell him everything. I will confess. I will throw myself on his mercy and pray that some part of me is still worth saving. N. The entry stopped there. Mid-sentence. The ink pooled slightly, like the pen had been dropped or lifted with a trembling hand. She never finished it. I sat in the candlelight for a long time, staring at those final words. Tonight I will go to him and beg forgiveness. She was going to confess. To Elder Feng. About whatever they were forcing her to do. The poisoning, it wasn't her plan. It was something done to her, or at least through her, and she was going to tell the one person who might have been able to stop it. But she never got the chance. The diary cuts off there. No explanation. No resolution. Just nothing. Like someone came into the room, and she had to hide it. And then she woke up in this body. And I woke up in hers. They wanted her to poison him, I said out loud, my voice barely a whisper in the quiet room. And she was going to tell, which means someone else finished the job. Someone who couldn't afford to let her confess. Someone who knew that if Elder Feng found out, their plans would collapse. I thought of Elder Wu, calm, respected, 3 lines in the novel. The man nobody suspected. I thought of the faction the novel mentioned, the ones who pushed Yan Bei into being their weapon. In the book, they were never named, never identified, just there. A vague threat that served the plot without ever becoming real. But they were real. They'd pressured her. They'd threatened her brother. They'd made her into something she never wanted to be. And when she tried to break free, they silenced her. I closed the diary. My fingers traced the faded blue cloth, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Grief. For a woman I'd never met. For a story the novel erased. For the confession she never got to make. Who pressed her? I asked the empty room. Who made her do it? No answer. The candle flickered. But somewhere out there, beyond these walls, someone knew. Someone who'd watched her pick up the poison, watched her hesitate, watched her decide to betray them instead, and decided that betraying them wasn't an option they could afford. Tomorrow, Elder Feng would wake for a single sentence before falling back into silence. The chapter clock would tick forward, but tonight, I had a new question. A worse question. If the original Yan Bei didn't poison Elder Feng, then who did? He hit the stone before anyone could catch him. One moment Elder Feng was standing at the altar, incense smoke rising, sleeves perfectly still. And then he simply wasn't standing anymore. The sound was horrible. Not dramatic. Just a body meeting flagstone, and the sharp crack of a knee, and then silence so absolute I could hear the incense burning. Every head in the courtyard turned. To me. I knew this was coming. I want to be clear about that. Chapter 2, Morning Rites. Elder Feng collapses. It was on the page. I read it. I highlighted it in my memory 3 days ago, when I first woke up in this body, and did an emergency inventory of everything I was about to walk into. What I did not account for was how it would feel to watch it happen while 200 people decided, in real time, that I did it. Shen Yao's hand moved to his sword hilt. I saw it from across the courtyard. Slow, deliberate. He wasn't drawing, not yet, just reminding me the option existed. His eyes were already a verdict. I know what that looks like, I told the audience, keeping my face perfectly still. I know exactly what every single person in this courtyard is thinking right now. Yan Bei, the novel's villain, had poisoned Elder Feng. That was established fact. Everyone knew it. The tribunal was already scheduled. The evidence trail was already laid. The only question the novel ever bothered to answer was when she'd finally be punished for it. The elder's attendant was frozen. The junior disciples were frozen. Su Mei stood 3 steps to my left, one hand pressed to her mouth, already in position, already performing shock in that particular way she had, the way that looked sincere until you remembered she'd positioned herself for the best sightline before he fell. I noticed that, filed it. The elder made a sound, small, pained. His fingers were moving against the stone. He was alive. For now. In the novel, this scene lasted exactly one paragraph. Elder Feng collapsed. Yan Bei stood watching with cold satisfaction. End of narrative function. He was a plot device that existed to justify the tribunal, and the tribunal existed to destroy the villain. And none of it required him to be a person. But his fingers were moving. And he was 73 years old, and his face was grey, and the particular colour of his skin told me something the novel never mentioned, because the novel's author never needed to know what spirit root poisoning actually looked like in the body, only what it looked like in a story. I knew what it looked like in the body. I'd spent 6 months in a hospital, watching my grandmother die of something slower but not entirely different. I knew what a failing core did to circulation. I knew what the grey-blue meant. This is the part, I said quietly, to no one and everyone. Where the villain watches, I walked forward instead. The crowd parted. It does that for Yan Bei, even now, muscle memory of authority, of a face that has always meant, get out of the way. I crossed the courtyard in 10 seconds and knelt at the elder's side before anyone thought to stop me. His eyes opened, confused, frightened. Don't move, I said. Your core is destabilizing. If you push chi right now, you'll accelerate the damage. And I heard Shen Yao stop walking somewhere behind me. I didn't look back. The elder's hand found my wrist. Weak grip. Yan, he started. Don't talk either. I pressed 2 fingers to the inside of his forearm, not a formal pulse reading, just locating the meridian. You're cold from the shoulder down. That means the poison is in the second channel, not the first. First channel you'd be in pain. Second channel you're going numb. Silence. Complete silence. I became aware, slowly, that the entire courtyard was staring at me, at the villain, kneeling in the dirt, doing something nobody in the novel had ever written her doing. There's a treatment, I said, to the elder, keeping my voice level. Not a cure. I don't have a cure. But there's something that will slow the deterioration. I know what he needs. Behind me, I heard Shen Yao's sword slide back into its sheath. Not agreement. Not trust. Just not yet. The elder's eyes stayed on my face. Searching. Looking for the person he'd always known in this body, and finding, I think, someone else entirely. His lips moved. Just barely. How, he whispered, do you know that? I opened my mouth, and his eyes closed again, his weight going slack against the stone, the question hanging in the air, above both of us unanswered, because Elder Feng had just run out of time to wait for the answer. The announcement hit like a physical blow. 10 days. The sect elders had gathered in the main hall at dawn, and Elder Wu, calm, fatherly, the one nobody suspected, had delivered the verdict with the practiced sorrow of a man burying a friend. The tribunal will convene in 10 days, he'd said. Justice will be served. Justice. Right. I stood in the back of the crowd, wearing the villain's cold mask, and felt my stomach turn to ice. 10 days. In the novel, the tribunal was a formality. Yan Bei convicted within the first act, the hero's sword finding her throat before the second chapter ended. But I wasn't Yan Bei, and the elder was still breathing. 10 days to find proof. 10 days to unmask a murderer who's been so careful, so invisible, that the entire sect thinks the villain did it. 10 days before they drag me before a court that's already decided I'm guilty. The chapter clock flickered in my peripheral vision. I didn't look this time. I didn't need to. The countdown was the only thing I could trust. 38 chapters. Someone had written a long story. And somewhere in those 38 chapters, there was a moment where everything went wrong for Yan Bei, where the evidence piled too high, where even the hero couldn't look away. I wasn't going to let it be this one. I waited until the third bell. The sect slept heavily after the chaos of the morning. 200 witnesses to my betrayal, plus the healers hovering over Elder Feng's fading pulse. Nobody would notice one more shadow slipping through the corridors. Famous last words, Wei Lan. You jinxed it. The medicine storage was on the eastern side of the compound, a low stone building with no windows and a lock that had probably not been changed in decades. I picked it with a hairpin, thank you, modern world lockpicking tutorials, and slipped inside. The smell hit me first. Herbs. Dust. The faint sweetness of something aged past its usefulness. Moonlight filtered through the doorway I'd left cracked open, painting silver stripes across rows of wooden shelves. Jars upon jars of dried roots, powders, tinctures. The novel had described this place once, in passing, when Yan Bei came to retrieve the poison she'd used. But that was wrong. That was the story's version. The version where she'd walked in with intent and walked out with murder in her sleeves. I moved carefully, shelf by shelf, scanning. The poisoning had happened in Elder Feng's private quarters, his medicine, his tea, his daily regimen. But the toxins had to come from somewhere. The novel assumed Yan Bei had brought her own. Hidden in her garments, smuggled in through channels even the sect's security couldn't trace. But what if she didn't? I reached the back of the storage room. The shelves here were older, their wood darkened with age. Emergency supplies, I guessed. Things nobody touched unless someone was dying. Someone was dying. I pulled the first jar. Empty. The second. Dust. The third, my fingers brushed glass. It was small, smaller than my palm. Amber-colored, the glass thick and dark, most of it shattered. What remained was a curved shard, maybe a quarter of the original container, with a residue at the bottom that caught the moonlight and turned it to liquid gold. I froze. No. No, no, no. In the novel's tribunal, in the evidence list that doomed Yan Bei, there was a broken vial. They'd found it in the courtyard, they'd said, near the scene of the crime. They'd held it up as proof, her poison, dropped in her haste, shattered when she fled. But this wasn't the courtyard. This was the storage room, behind a shelf, tucked into a corner where nobody would look. This wasn't supposed to exist. I held my breath and tilted the shard, watching the residue slide. It was viscous, thick. Whatever had been inside had been concentrated. A little would go a long way. The spirit poison was rare. The novel mentioned that. Only a handful of people in the entire cultivation world had access to it. Core elders, sect leaders, people who'd been to the Western Caves and bargained with the merchants there. Elder Wu had been to the Western Caves. I set the shard down, carefully, and stared at it. This isn't supposed to be here. The novel's tribunal never found this. Either the investigators were bad, or someone cleaned up and missed one. And someone, the real poisoner, the person who actually killed Elder Feng, the one who's been framing Yan Bei from the start, was here, in this room. At some point, they came back to clean up, and they missed this. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my thighs and made them stop. One piece of evidence. One tiny, impossible piece of evidence that shouldn't exist. And it's in my hands. I wrapped the shard in my sleeve. It felt heavier than it should, like I was carrying not glass, but a verdict. A reversal. A chance. Here is the problem. Wei Lan. I crept back through the shadows, heart pounding with every step. The night was quiet. Too quiet. The sect had exhausted itself with suspicion and shock. Even the patrol rotations seemed slower, lazier. Problem 1, I couldn't prove I'd found it tonight. Anyone could claim I'd planted it, and they would. The moment I presented this to the tribunal, Elder Wu's people would call it a lie. Yan Bei, the schemer, the poisoner, faking evidence to save her own neck. Problem 2, I didn't know who else was involved. The novel mentioned a network, characters I'd never met, channels I'd never traced. Shui was one. There would be others. Bringing one piece of evidence to light might just get me killed faster. Problem 3, 10 days. I reached my chambers without incident. Barred the door. Lit a single candle. The shard sat on my table, gleaming dully in the weak light. I stared at it like it might suddenly reveal its secrets. Tell me who held it last, who filled it, who pressed it into the cracks of this sect's carefully maintained silence. It didn't, but it was there. It was real. And somewhere in the compound, the person who'd used it was going about their night, confident that their cleanup had been thorough. Not thorough enough. I thought of Elder Feng, lying pale and fading in his bed. I thought of the promise I'd made, to him, to the original Yan Bei, to myself. I thought of the chapter clock and the countdown and the 38 chapters still unwritten. Okay. I picked up the shard, turned it over, let the moonlight catch the residue one more time. I have 10 days. I have one piece of evidence. And now I have something the novel never gave me. Proof that someone else was here. Someone who isn't me. The candle flickered. Outside, somewhere in the distance, a night bird called once, twice, then silence. I didn't sleep. You didn't humiliate me. I froze. The corridor was empty. It had been empty. It should have stayed empty. I had specifically chosen this route through the East Wing because it was always empty at this hour. And yet, here was a man I barely recognized, blocking the passage between me and my chambers, arms crossed, watching me with the expression of someone who had been waiting a long time for an answer. At the investiture ceremony, he said, last week, Yan Bei would have said something. She always said something. You walked right past me. His name came to me slowly, assembled from the novel's background detail like a footnote surfacing. Mao Lin. Dismissed servant. Bitter. Irrelevant. Except he was standing directly in front of me, and he did not look irrelevant at all. Let me explain something about the original Yan Bei's relationship with the servant class. She was not casually cruel. That would have required a certain relaxed confidence. No, she was precise about it. Deliberate. She knew which servants were proud, she knew which ones could be shamed publicly, and she deployed that knowledge the way a strategist deploys artillery, for maximum, measured destruction. Mao Lin, according to 3 throwaway lines in the novel, had been dismissed from her personal household 6 months ago after refusing to falsify a supply record. Yan Bei had made an example of him at the next gathering. He'd been assigned to the outer grounds ever since, which in sect terms was approximately 1 step above leave and never return. He hated her. He was staring at me now with an expression I couldn't quite classify. Not quite hostility, not quite hope. More like a man who had formed a theory and was waiting to be proven wrong. I was busy, I said. Not my most inspired line. But it was honest, which was unusual enough in this hallway. Busy, he repeated. Flat. Unconvinced. You walked past me. You made eye contact. I was prepared for, he stopped. Recalibrated. She had a particular way of smiling. You didn't do it. I did not say, because I don't know how she smiled, because I've only had this face for 2 weeks, because I'm doing my best, and even my best is apparently wrong. What I said was, "What do you want, Mao Lin?" He looked at me like the question itself was suspicious, which, given Yan Bei's history, it probably was. The original version of this conversation would have gone very differently. There would have been contempt. There would have been a dismissal designed to humiliate. There would have been that particular smile he'd mentioned. Instead, there was me, in a corridor at an odd hour, genuinely curious what a bitter dismissed servant had decided to do with his evening. "I was there," he said, "the night the elder was poisoned. I was working the late shift in the outer kitchen, supply accounting, since they won't let me do anything else. I passed the medicine hall." He stopped. My heart did something complicated. "I saw who wasn't there," he said. "I understand, narratively, that I should have played this cool. Should have kept the mask intact, imperious, disinterested, doing him the grand favor of not walking away. But the problem with receiving genuinely important information is that it bypasses the mask entirely and goes straight to the part of me that spent 2 weeks hoping someone had seen something. "Tell me," I said. And then, because that came out too raw and too direct, "Tell me what you saw." His eyes narrowed. "Why should I? You made my life miserable for 2 years. You had me dismissed. You told Elder Shui I was dishonest. Elder Shui, that name landed wrong, landed in a place I'd been trying not to poke at since I found the vial shard. I filed it away and tried to keep my face neutral. Because," I said slowly, "I'm asking you, not ordering you." Asking. The silence in the corridor stretched long enough that I started calculating escape routes. Then he said, "She never asked for anything." "I know," I said. "And I did know. I'd read it." She demanded. She required. She insisted. But she never asked, because asking implied the other person could say no. That was the detail that undid him. Not an apology, not a reversal, not some dramatic speech about being a changed woman. Just the structure of a question. He didn't believe I was her. He was going to help me anyway. He talked for 6 minutes. I stood very still and let him, because interrupting felt like it might break whatever strange compact had formed in this corridor between a man who despised Yan Mingzhu and a woman who was wearing her face without her permission. What he had seen. The medicine hall door closed and latched at the hour when it should have been open. The elder's evening treatment was logged for that window. He had seen the schedule because outer staff did the supply runs. What he had not seen, the attendant who was supposed to be inside, what he had seen instead, Elder Wu walking away from the east corridor at an unhurried pace, alone, at an hour when core elders did not typically walk anywhere unattended. He said the name carefully, like he'd been carrying it for 2 weeks and hadn't known what to do with it. I did not react. I locked every muscle in my face, applied the villain mask-like armor, and said nothing. Inside, quietly, he's not in the novel. He's not supposed to be there. That's not a chapter. That's a person. "You're not her," Mao Lin said. Not a question. Just a fact, offered to the air between us. I don't know what happened, or where she went. But you are not Yan Bei. The corridor felt very long and very cold. I looked at him for a moment, this bitter, sharp, careful man who had spent 6 months in the outer grounds cataloguing his grievances, and made a decision. "Meet me tomorrow morning," I said, "before the tribunal convenes. Come as a witness." He stared. "I'll explain what I can," I said. "I won't order you. I won't threaten you. You can refuse. He looked at me for a long time. Then he looked away, down the corridor, toward the exit that led back to the outer grounds and the small defeated life the original Yan Bei had arranged for him. She would never offer me that, he said quietly. I know, I said. She was busy. He left without answering. I stood in the corridor alone, the shard still wrapped in my sleeve, the cold settling back into the stone around me, and the name, Elder Wu, sitting in my chest, like a splinter, looking for the right direction to move. He'd said, "You're not her," like it was simply true, like he'd known for a week, and had only now found the right moment to say it aloud. Which meant I wasn't as convincing as I thought. Which meant someone else, someone watching more carefully, with more to gain, might have already said the same thing to themselves in the quiet of their own rooms. The question was, who got there first? He said her name like it was a verdict. Not my name, her name. Yan Mingju, the person whose body I borrowed, whose enemies I inherited, whose very bad decisions I've been cleaning up for the past several weeks. He said it, and the entire tribunal chamber went so quiet I could hear the incense burning. And then Mao Lin, dismissed servant, professional grudge holder, last person on this mountain who ever had a kind word for the original me, Mao Lin said, she was not there. I saw her. She was crying at the ridge. She was not anywhere near the medicine hall. I stood in the defendant's dock and thought, oh, she had an alibi this whole time. And then the second thought hit, the worst one, she never used it. Why didn't she use it? Let me back up 12 seconds, because you deserve to understand how I got here. Right. Chapter 3. In the novel, Chapter 3 is titled The Weight of Evidence. I remember this because I read it twice and thought the author was being dramatic. The chapter is mostly tribunal scenes, testimony stacking up against Yan Mingju, Shen Yao's quiet competence looking worse and worse for her, and somewhere around the midpoint, she finally breaks and screams at one of the witnesses, and that's the moment everyone decides she's guilty. It's not subtle. The author was not subtle. Here's what I know about Chapter 3, that the novel never explains. Mao Lin exists in it. He's in the background. He carries a water basin past one scene. He says nothing. He has no lines. In the novel, nobody ever asks him anything. In the novel, I didn't recruit him last week and promise him I wasn't the person who used to throw his wages at his head and call him a weed in human clothing. Small changes. Cascading consequences. I am so tired. The tribunal hall smelled like old wood and older grudges. The elders on the dais had the particular stillness of people who have already decided the outcome and are waiting for the paperwork to catch up. Elder Qian, the scheming one, the one backing the losing succession candidate, had his hands folded in a way that suggested deep spiritual peace and actually suggested he was calculating how long until I was formally expelled. Elder Wu sat 2 seats to his left. I am going to say that again, because I want you to pay attention to it. Elder Wu sat 2 seats to his left. Calm, unhurried, faintly interested in the proceedings the way you're faintly interested in rain. Present, visible, not something you caused. I noted this, and then the doors opened, and Mao Lin walked in, and I had to stop noting things and start paying attention. He looked terrible. Not tragic terrible, tired terrible. The kind of face you get when you've spent 3 days arguing with yourself about whether to say the thing you're about to say. Shen Yao called him forward. I watched from the dock. Here is the thing about Shen Yao that the novel gets mostly right. He is methodical. He doesn't perform. He doesn't make speeches. He asks questions the way you'd place stones in a river, one at a time, where he wants them. Every tribunal scene in chapters 1 and 2 had the same rhythm. He'd build the evidence stack, let it speak, Let the subject destroy themselves trying to argue with it. It works. It has been working against me specifically for the past several weeks. He asked Mao Lin his name, his position, his duties on the night in question. Mao Lin answered all of it in the voice of a man who has decided to say the thing he did not want to say and is going to say it without drama because he is already exhausted by the drama. He'd been walking night patrol on the outer paths, unofficial, unpaid, just habit, because the original Yan Mingzhu had stopped giving him work and he'd started filling time with movement so he wouldn't think too much. He'd taken the long path around the ridge, and at the sword practice ridge, Shen Yao said, "Did you see anything?" Mao Lin's jaw worked for a moment. I saw her. The chamber did not go quiet. It went still, which is different. Quiet is the absence of sound. Still is the absence of breath. Yan Mingzhu, Mao Lin said, sitting at the top of the practice steps. Not doing anything. Just sitting. A pause. Crying. I kept my face in its villain mask. Cold, slight, vaguely contemptuous. The face that came with the body. Inside, I was doing something that felt a lot like a door opening in a locked room I didn't know existed. She was crying. The original Yan Mingzhu, the villain, the woman who ran this body before I arrived, had been sitting on the sword practice ridge, alone, weeping, while someone she presumably trusted was walking into the medicine hall and poisoning Elder Feng, while the evidence was being laid. She hadn't known, or she'd known something was wrong and hadn't known what, or she had known and was grieving it. I did not know which one. That was the problem. Shen Yao asked the question I was dreading. Did she see you? No, Mao Lin said. It was dark. I had a shielded lamp. I didn't want to. He stopped. I didn't want to interrupt her. There was something in that pause I filed away. He hadn't wanted to interrupt. Not because he was afraid of her. Because of something else. I could not name it yet. How long did she remain there? I came back the same path an hour later. She was gone. Shen Yao wrote something. The scratching of the brush was very loud. Why, he said, still writing, did you not come forward with this information before now? And here Mao Lin did something I didn't expect. He looked directly at me. Nobody asked me, he said. And she never mentioned she needed it. I spent the next 20 minutes of testimony keeping my face correct while my internal narrator went completely off the rails. She never used it. That is the part that I cannot make fit anywhere comfortable. The original Yan Mingzhu was not stupid. She was cruel and calculating, and she had the political instincts of someone who'd survived this sect from childhood. She knew how tribunals worked. She knew what evidence looked like, how it was gathered, who controlled it. If she'd been at the ridge, if she had a witness, even an unfriendly one, even a dismissed servant with reasons to stay quiet, she would have known his existence mattered. Unless she didn't know she needed an alibi because she didn't know a crime had been committed yet. Or she knew and she thought the person behind it would protect her. Or she knew and she was protecting them. I stood in the dock and turned these three options over like stones, looking for the worm underneath. The third one kept landing face up. Shen Yao dismissed Mao Lin. There was a murmur in the chamber, the kind that means the assembled witnesses and junior disciples and political hangers-on have just been given something they didn't expect and are reprocessing. Elder Qian's folded hands tightened very slightly. I noticed because I was watching for it. Elder Wu's expression did not change at all. I noticed that too. Shen Yao turned to the dais. This testimony, he said, in the measured way of a man whose mental model of the case has just been complicated, and who is doing it the courtesy of acknowledging that, places the accused at a location inconsistent with direct access to the medicine hall at the time of the poisoning. It does not resolve the question of her role in planning or facilitating the act. He looked at me. It does, however, require the tribunal to consider alternative framings. Alternative framings. In court speak, that means I was wrong about something, and I am saying so in language that doesn't quite admit it. It is noted, Elder Qian said, which is also court speak, and in this case means, I have noted it, and I intend to do nothing about it. Elder Wu said nothing. I thought, why are you so calm? Recess. 40 minutes. The hall emptied in the specific way of institutions, the important people first, the spectators after, the servants last. Mao Lin caught my eye on his way out. I gave him the smallest nod I could manage, the kind that might have been neck stiffness. He gave me something back that might have been acknowledgement or might have been contempt. Probably both. I was escorted to the antechamber, where accused parties wait during recesses. It smelled like dust and other people's anxiety. I sat on the provided bench, dismissed the escort with enough cold authority that they actually left, and allowed myself approximately 90 seconds of thinking out loud in my own head, at full volume. She went to warn him. The diary entry. Episode 4. Yes, I'm counting episodes now. It makes the continuity easier, the last entry before the poisoning. I'd found it in the hidden drawer, and I'd read it, and I'd thought, this doesn't sound like a villain. It sounds like someone who found out something terrible and didn't know what to do with it. I hadn't been able to make it connect to anything. Too many moving pieces, too little context. But now, she was at the ridge. Alone. Weeping. An hour before Shen Yao found the elder. And the diary entry said something about going to speak to someone. I'd translated the classical characters in my head as to give warning, but it might also be to plead with. The difference matters enormously. If she went to warn the person planning the poisoning, trying to talk them out of it, and they did it anyway, she knew. She was complicit through silence. She couldn't use the alibi without explaining where she'd been going, and why. If she went to warn the elder himself and arrived too late, or wasn't believed, or was turned away, she'd been trying to prevent it. She was a witness to her own frame-up. And she'd sat on the ridge afterward and wept about it. Either way, she'd protected someone's name by staying quiet. I needed to know whose. The antechamber door opened. I reassembled the mask in about half a second. Years of experience in stressful job environments pay off in unexpected ways. It was Shen Yao. He didn't sit. He stood with his arms at his sides and his face doing the thing it does when he is recalibrating, which I have started to recognize as two slight lines appearing above his left eyebrow. He'd had a lot of recalibration moments recently. I was responsible for most of them. You knew about Mao Lin, he said. Yes, you recruited him. Before the tribunal session. I spoke with him. He offered the testimony voluntarily. After you spoke with him. I tilted my head. Is there a question? The two lines above his left eyebrow deepened slightly. Why did you have to recruit him? If you were innocent, you would simply have provided his name to the tribunal. You would have known, from the beginning, that he could place you elsewhere. And there it was. The clean version of the trap. If I'd known I was innocent from the start, I'd have led with the alibi. The fact that I hadn't, the fact that I'd spent weeks surviving on other evidence, and only brought Mao Lin in last week, suggests I didn't know what he'd seen. Which suggests Either I didn't think I needed an alibi because I expected to be acquitted on other grounds, or I genuinely didn't know where the original body had been that night. Both options are true. Both options are impossible to explain. I wasn't sure he'd been seen, I said. I wasn't sure what he'd seen. Someone weeping on a ridge in the dark is not, by itself, exculpatory. I met his eyes. I needed to know what he'd say before I asked the tribunal to hear it. That is an extremely careful answer. I am an extremely careful person. He looked at me for a long moment. The diary, he said finally. I waited. You referenced it in the 4th session. You said the last entry contained instructions she left herself. I've been authorized to read the full text. He paused. I've read it now. My pulse did something I didn't authorize. And she wrote that she had discovered something wrong, that she intended to speak to someone before it went further. He said this without inflection, the way you report facts you don't have a framework for yet. She did not name the person. No, I said. She wouldn't. Why not? Because she was protecting them, I said. Or protecting herself from the implication of knowing. Or both. I looked at the wall. She went there to stop it. I think she failed. I think she sat on the ridge afterward because she didn't know what to do next, and then she ran out of time to figure it out. Silence. The kind that means a calculation is being performed. If that is true, Shen Yao said carefully, then someone knew she had that knowledge, and needed her discredited before she could use it. Yes, which means the poisoning was not primarily about the elder. No, I said. I don't think it ever was. I need to tell you what I saw, and I need you to understand that I cannot prove any of it, and I need you to understand that it matters anyway. When Shen Yao left the antechamber, I waited for the escort. We walked back through the corridor that runs along the eastern side of the main hall, the one with the lattice windows that look into the Elder Council's private garden. I don't know if you've ever been to a sect compound, but the garden is where the elders take air during recesses. It's protocol. They stand in the garden, they have tea, they perform not discussing tribunal proceedings at each other. Elder Wu was in the garden. He was not having tea. He was standing at the far wall where the medicinal herb beds are, or were, before some combination of neglect and autumn. And he was speaking to a junior cultivation disciple I did not recognize. I would not have thought anything of this. Elders speak to disciples. This is the function of the relationship. Except, the disciple was not from the inner sect. I know the inner sect robes. I've been surrounded by them for weeks. I've been judged in rooms full of them. I've had to remember the color coding in a hurry. The grey hem trim with the meridian stitching means outer sect, administration track. Outer sect, administration track disciples do not typically have private garden conversations with core elders during tribunal recesses. And the conversation was very short, 12 seconds at most. The disciple nodded once, tucked something into his sleeve, and left through the garden's eastern exit, the one that opens towards the mountain path, rather than the inner compound. Elder Wu turned back toward the hall. For one moment, because of the angle of the lattice, he was facing directly toward my corridor. He did not see me. I am almost certain he did not see me. The light was wrong, and I was standing still, and the lattice cast enough shadow. His face was calm. It is always calm. But there was something behind the calm that I have seen before, in other contexts, in people managing multiple variables simultaneously. It's the face of someone who has just made a small adjustment to a larger plan. My escort said, "Lady Yan, the hall is reconvening." I walked. I kept walking. I kept my face correct, and my spine straight, and the villain mask firmly in place, and I filed away every detail I had just seen. The disciple, the sleeve, the eastern exit, the 12 seconds, and I thought, that was not in any chapter I read. I have read this novel. I know Elder Wu exists. He is in 3 scenes. He carries an ornamental fan in one of them. He has no private garden conversations. He has no outer sect contacts. He has no reason to be sending someone down the mountain path during a tribunal recess. He is supposed to be background. He is not background. The tribunal reconvened. Shen Yao presented the formal notation of Mao Lin's testimony as material to the case. Elder Qian accepted it with the grace of a man swallowing something he did not order. The session closed without resolution. The tribunal would review and reconvene in 3 days. 3 days. I stood in the corridor afterward, attendants at a polite distance, and let myself have exactly 1 moment of something adjacent to relief. Mao Lin's testimony had done what I needed it to do. The alibi was on record. The case against the original Yan Mingju had just become significantly more complicated, which means the case against me had become significantly less straightforward. The diary matters now in a way it didn't before. Shen Yao knows it matters. He will think about what he read. He will follow the implication she was protecting someone who needed her gone, which means the poisoning had a second purpose. He will get there. He is good at getting there, but Elder Wu has 3 days too. And I don't know who that disciple was. I don't know what was passed in the sleeve. I don't know where the eastern path leads specifically, or what's at the end of it, or whether I've just watched the beginning of something I have no category for. In the novel, there is no Chapter 3 plot movement that involves Elder Wu acting. There is no Chapter 3 moment where I should be frightened of something the antagonist is doing outside the frame. There is no version of the story where what I just saw makes sense as background. I am improvising now, in a way I have not been before. The foreknowledge is not gone yet. I still know broad strokes. I still know some of what's coming, but the details are wrong. The pieces are shifting. Something I did, or something the original Yan Mingju did before I arrived, has already moved things off the rails far enough that Elder Wu is making adjustments I have no text for. The alibi was today's win. Tomorrow is going to be something I have never read. I need to know who that disciple reports to, and I need to know before Elder Wu realizes I saw him. The text was beautiful. I don't mean that as a compliment. I mean it the way you might admire the craftsmanship of a trap right after your foot goes through the bottom of it. The medicine script on the first shelf of the inner sect library was some of the most elegant calligraphy I had ever seen in my life, and I could not read a single character of it. That's not okay. Let me back up. I had a vial. Half a vial, technically. The broken half, the one I'd found wedged inside the lacquer box that nobody was supposed to find, in the room that nobody was supposed to search, because everyone had already decided I was the one who poisoned Elder Feng. And why would the guilty party hand over her own evidence? I'd kept it for 3 days in the inner pocket of my robe, next to my ribs, which meant I'd slept with broken glass against my skin for 3 nights, because I am, as previously established, having a spectacular time. The vial had residue. A smell, something medicinal and wrong, like dried herbs with an undernote that made the back of your throat feel nervous. I needed to know what it was. The broken vial wasn't enough on its own. Shen Yao would look at it and say interesting in that quiet, careful way of his, and then use it as one more thing to think about rather than act on, which is his whole personality apparently, and I'm not bitter about it. I needed the name, the compound, something I could point to. So I came to the library, and I have been standing in front of this shelf for 45 minutes. Here is something nobody tells you about transmigrating into a cultivation novel. The body has instincts, and the mind has memories, and those are two completely different filing systems, and they do not talk to each other. If someone swings a sword at me, Yan Bei's body moves. I don't decide to deflect. My arm is already up, my weight is already shifting, my chi is already routing to the right meridians. It's muscle memory so deep it bypasses thinking entirely. First week here, I kept startling myself. Someone raised their voice too fast, and my hand was at my belt before I registered what was happening. Yan Bei's body was apparently trained by people who believed in consequences for slowness, and those lessons did not leave with her. But scholarship, books, written text, that, apparently, was never her priority. I pulled the third volume from the shelf and opened it to a chapter that the spine suggested was about compound interactions. I could tell from the structural diagram on the first page, which was at least a visual language I could partially follow. Diagrams are diagrams. A plant drawing is a plant drawing, but the annotations, the proportions, the names of the compounds being combined, all of that was dense classical medicine script, the academic dialect of a world that had been developing specialized notation for 2,000 years. And Yan Bei had apparently never needed to read it, because Yan Bei had never needed to solve a poisoning case, because Yan Bei had been too busy causing problems of a different kind. I stood there with the book open in my hands and felt, not for the first time, like an imposter wearing an imposter's clothes. Mao Lin had found me at the path junction this morning. He'd appeared from behind a garden wall with the air of a man who had been waiting there for some time, which he denied immediately when I looked at him. I wasn't waiting, he said. I was walking. You were waiting, I said. He shrugged. He had the manner of someone who had decided, at some point recently, that pretending took more energy than it was worth. The outer disciples are talking, he said quietly. 3 of them near the western kitchen, saying the tribunal is stalled. Saying Elder Wu suggested a recess to let tempers cool. I had gone very still. Elder Wu. Calm, measured, always in the background, never raising his voice. The man who in the novel had approximately 4 lines and 0 relevance, and whose name I had nonetheless been carrying in my chest like a splinter for 2 days, because I'd caught a glimpse of something on his sleeve, something that didn't match. And the novel had never mentioned it, because the novel had never been looking at him. Elder Wu suggested a recess, I repeated. Day after tomorrow, Mao Lin said. Effective immediately if the head elder agrees. He paused. Buys him time to do something, I'd guess. Yes. That was exactly what I'd guessed too, which was why I was in the library instead of eating breakfast, which was why I needed to know what was in the vial, which was why I was standing here holding a book I could not read, feeling the very specific despair of someone who has identified the problem precisely and cannot do anything about it. I turned the page. More diagrams, more annotations in the academic script. I could pick out radicals, individual components of characters, but assembling them into meaning was another matter entirely. It was like having a vocabulary of 50 words in a language that had 10,000 and being handed a contract to sign. The smell of the vile residue, that was my only real clue. That particular undernote, the nervous throat quality. I'd smelled something like it once, in the outer corridor near the medicine hall, drifting from an elder's workroom. I couldn't name it. I just knew it was wrong the way you know certain things are wrong before you can explain why. A sound at the wrong pitch, a shadow at the wrong angle. I need a translator, I thought. Or a poison specialist. or someone who has been actually educated in the medicine texts of this sect, instead of dropped into an ongoing crisis with no instruction manual. I set the book down on the reading table and pressed my palms flat against the surface and breathed. In the novel, the poison was named eventually. In the novel, the right people found the right evidence through a process that was largely driven by Shen Yao being capable and righteous and determined. I was not Shen Yao. I was not in a position to be righteous and determined about classical script I couldn't read. I was in a position of having a broken vial and a time limit, and a man I suspected had done something terrible who was currently being described as a voice of measured reason. I should have paid more attention in the chapters where characters read books, is what I'm saying. Nobody ever thinks those scenes matter. They're always the ones you skim. I heard footsteps. Not startling ones. Measured, soft, the footsteps of someone who had been in libraries before and understood the social contract around noise. I didn't look up immediately. There were other disciples who used this space, and my presence here was not remarkable, probably. Yan Bei's presence in the medicine section might be marginally surprising to anyone paying close attention, but I was hoping nobody would be paying close attention. The footsteps stopped. I looked up. Su Mei. She was standing in the aisle between the second and third shelves, holding a small cloth-wrapped bundle that I assumed contained whatever she'd come to return or retrieve. She was dressed simply, the white and pale blue of the outer-facing disciple robes, rather than the inner sect formal wear she'd worn to the tribunal sessions. Without the formal context, she looked younger, and the expression on her face when she registered me was complicated. Not afraid, not hostile. Not the warm, reflexive brightness she turned toward Shen Yao. Something more careful than any of those. "Lady Yan," she said. Perfectly correct form of address. Perfectly neutral delivery. "Su Mei," I said, which was also neutral and also told us nothing about each other. We stood there for a moment in the particular silence of two people who have mutual reasons to find this situation strange and are both pretending they don't. "You're studying medicine texts," she said. It wasn't quite a question. I looked at the volume open on the table in front of me. I had approximately 0 plausible cover for this. The medicine section was not Yan Bei's section. The original Yan Mingju had been a cultivation prodigy with 0 scholarly inclinations, and the texts in front of me were from the compound pharmacology shelf, and there was really no interpretation of my presence here that didn't require explanation. "Studying," I said carefully, "implies a level of success I haven't achieved." She almost smiled. It was quick, barely a shift in her expression, gone before it properly arrived. "The older pharmacology texts use the Shuren system," she said. "Academic notation from the pre-consolidation period. Most inner disciples can't read it." I looked at her. She looked at the book. "I can translate," she said, "if you need it." And there it was. I felt the offer land the way you feel, an unexpected weight placed in your hands, sudden, heavy, requiring you to decide immediately what to do with it. She said it easily, lightly, in the tone of someone doing an unremarkable favor. Her face was open. Her posture was relaxed. She had moved into position, I thought, before I even knew she was in the room. In the book, and I have thought about this, I have had time to think about this, I have had 3 sleepless nights with broken glass near my ribs, and apparently nothing to do but replay chapters. Su Mei never voluntarily spent time near Yan Bei. This was not a coincidence. This was characterization. Su Mei's role in the novel was the good girl, the one Shen Yao moved toward, the contrast character who showed what genuine kindness looked like relative to the villain's cruelty. She was warmth. She was sincerity. She was the character who would flinch slightly whenever Yan Mingju entered a room, because Yan Mingju was the kind of person who made people flinch. They shared a sect. They had, presumably, been aware of each other for years. They had never, in any chapter I could remember, been alone in a room together by choice. I looked at her standing there with her little cloth-wrapped bundle and her calm offer to translate, and I thought, you avoided her. The original Yan Bei, the one you knew, you avoided that person. The cruelty was real. The danger was real. And you stayed clear because you were sensible and self-preserving, and that was the right choice. So, why are you here? My narration was running ahead of me. I was aware of it, that slightly detached quality that happens when my actual face is doing one thing and my interior is doing something completely different, and whatever I was doing with my face right now was apparently holding, because Sume was still waiting, still holding her bundle, still wearing that careful, open expression. Why are you here? I could think of 3 possibilities. Option 1, she was here coincidentally. This was her usual library day, and she'd made the offer because she was, in fact, a genuinely kind person who helped people who looked stuck, and my paranoia was manufacturing significance from a casual gesture. Option 2, she had followed me here, or been told I was here, and the offer to translate was an attempt to find out what I was looking for, and why. Someone wanted to know what evidence I had, or thought I had, or was building toward. Option 3, something I couldn't name yet. Something the novel hadn't shown me because the novel had never bothered to look at her closely enough to know the third option existed. I had been in this world for 9 days. I had been wrong about the timeline. I had been wrong about Mao Lin's bitterness being permanent. I had been wrong about my ability to stay invisible and let events proceed. I had been wrong about which chapter I was in when I arrived. I was not confident in my read of Sume. The Shuren system, I said. Yes, she said. You learned it as part of your studies? My master uses it, she said. Older methodology. He believes the pre-consolidation texts have compounds that didn't survive the standardization. Things the academies decided weren't practical enough to keep. A small pause. He's usually right. Her master. That was a thread. I didn't pull it. I'll manage, I said. Something moved in her expression. Not disappointment exactly. Something more layered than disappointment. Of course, she said. She turned to go. I watched her walk to the far shelf, retrieve something, not a book, something smaller, wrapped in paper, and make her way toward the library's exit. Her footsteps were as quiet going out as they'd been coming in. At the door, she paused. She didn't look back. She just stopped. For 2 full seconds, maybe 3. Her hand on the doorframe. Her head slightly inclined, not quite toward me, not quite away. Then she walked out. I stood very still in the silence she left behind. In the novel, in Chapter 9, Sume had been at the East Garden with 3 other outer sect disciples, working on a group cultivation exercise. I had a clear memory of the sentence, because it was the chapter I'd been reading right before the dream, right before whatever happened that put me here, and I'd noticed the detail, because it seemed so deliberately wholesome, so pointedly establishing where she was, as if the novel needed her alibi confirmed for some future chapter. She had not been in the library in Chapter 9. I looked down at the medicine text, the diagrams, the annotations I couldn't read. The vial residue had a smell. I knew the smell was wrong. I couldn't name what made it wrong. She had paused at the door and not looked back, and in the novel, she would have had no reason to pause at all. I was going to be thinking about that pause for the rest of the day. I was going to be sitting here with a book I couldn't read, turning that pause over in my mind the way you turn a piece of evidence over, trying to find the angle where it makes sense, and it wasn't going to help me identify the compound in the vial. And Mao Lin's information about the tribunal recess meant I had less time than I thought, and the one person who could read the pharmacology texts I needed had just walked out of the library, and I had declined to let her stay. I picked up the vial. The residue caught the light from the high window, a faint, dried smear along the interior, amber brown, the colour of something that had once been active. It had a weight to it, even empty. Something that had existed in the world, been carried somewhere, been used, and left this trace behind, as evidence of what it had been. I needed its name. I needed it before Elder Wu's recess bought him the time to make me irrelevant. I did not know if Su Mei could safely give it to me. I did not know anymore what safely even meant in reference to her. The door was closed. The library was quiet. The texts were still in the script I couldn't read, holding whatever information they held, patient the way very old books are patient, because they have watched people fail to understand them before, and they will watch again, and it costs them nothing. I was going to have to find another way. Or I was going to have to make a decision about the woman who had paused at the door and not looked back, and the fact that she hadn't looked back was somehow the thing that bothered me most, because it was the same gesture twice, from a character the novel had told me to understand one way, and I was no longer certain I understood anything about the version of her standing in front of me. She already knew I was looking at medicine texts. Whatever I was searching for, she had seen the shelf. She had made the offer. She had left without pressing when I declined. Either that was grace, or it was patience. I didn't know which one was more dangerous. He appeared like he'd been waiting for me. Not in the open, that would be too obvious. Shen Yao had positioned himself in the shadowed alcove near the East Wing's north corridor, half hidden by a marble pillar, arms folded, waiting. The late afternoon light caught the edge of his blade, visible at his hip, and his eyes tracked me the way a hunter tracks prey. Of course, he's been following me since Ep 8. Since I started asking questions about the broken vial, I stopped walking. My hand naturally moved to the sleeve where I'd tucked the vial fragment, the piece I'd found in Ep 6, the piece that had started everything. I'd been carrying it for days, waiting for the right moment, the right person. This isn't the right moment. This is a trap. Or a test. Or both. "You're up late," he said. His voice was calm, measured. The voice of a man who'd already decided what he believed and was just waiting for me to confirm it. Classic Shen Yao, the righteous hero, the one who's supposed to destroy the villainess. In the book, he was certain from chapter 3. Certain she was guilty. Certain she was evil. But this isn't the book, and I'm not the villain she was supposed to be. People don't usually wait in dark corridors to discuss the weather, I said. My voice came out flat. Cold. The villain mask. Automatic. "What do you want?" He stepped out of the shadow. The light fell across his face, angular, determined, frustratingly heroic. In the novel, he was the one who always chose right, who always won, who always saw through the villain's tricks. "Too bad for him, I'm not playing the villain's game. You've been asking questions," he said. About the poisoning, about the elders, about the vial fragments. Damn Mao Lin. No, wait. Mao Lin didn't say anything. He's loyal. It's someone else. Someone I haven't identified yet. People ask questions, I said. It's not a crime. It's suspicious when you've never asked questions before. When you've never cared about anyone in this sect enough to investigate their deaths. He thinks I'm framing someone. He thinks this is a trick, that I'm trying to redirect blame onto someone else, the way the original Yan Bei would have done. He's half right. I am trying to find the real poisoner, but not to frame someone. To save my own neck. And maybe, to save the old man who doesn't deserve to die. I met his eyes, held them, the villain's gaze, cold, unyielding, impossible to read. And if I have? I asked. What business is it of yours? Something flickered across his face. Confusion, frustration, the tiniest crack in his certainty. There it is. The thing I've been waiting for. He doesn't know what to do with me. I'm not acting like Yan Bei. I'm not threatening him, not mocking him, not playing the cruel game he expected. I'm just investigating, quietly, desperately, and it's messing with his head. I pulled the vial fragment from my sleeve. The glass caught the light, broken, jagged, a shard of something that had once held poison. I'd wrapped it in cloth to keep from cutting myself, but even so, it looked dangerous. It looked like evidence. It looked like a weapon. His eyes locked onto it. Where did you find this? His voice had changed. Lower, more guarded. Now we're talking. Now he's interested. In the gardens, I said. Near the Eastern Fountain. Ep 6, remember? The day after Elder Feng collapsed. I was walking back from the disciple quarters, and I saw something on the ground. Glass. Shiny. I picked it up. I watched his face as I spoke. Watched for the skepticism, the suspicion, the dismissive curl of the lip that said, "Of course you'd say that. Of course you'd lie." It didn't come. Wait, you're telling me you found this 4 episodes ago, he said slowly. And you're only bringing it up now? 4 episodes. That's how long I've been holding it. Waiting. Trying to figure out what to do with it, who to trust, how to use it, without getting myself killed. In the novel, Yan Bei would have used it as a weapon. Planted it on someone. Framed them. Destroyed them. But I'm not Yan Bei. And I don't know who to frame. I only know there's a real poisoner out there, someone the novel never named, because the original story ended before anyone found out. Elder Wu, he's still out there. Still calm. Still respected. Still untouchable. I wasn't sure what it was, I said. I didn't know if it mattered. I didn't know if it would help me or hurt me. I paused. Let the truth bleed through. I'm not sure I know that now. Shen Yao stared at me. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The corridor was silent, the kind of silence that has weight, that presses down on your chest. Say something, I thought. Call me a liar. Draw your sword. Tell me you're going to take this to the elders and watch me burn anything but this. This silence is worse. I'll have it analyzed, he said finally. I blinked. That's it? That's all he's going to say? He reached out, slowly, deliberately, and I placed the vial fragment in his palm. His fingers closed around it. His expression didn't change. He didn't say he believed me. He didn't say he was going to help me. He just said he'd have it analyzed, which means he thinks it might be real evidence. Which means he's willing to consider, just consider, that I might not be the villain he thought I was. Which means something. Right? Where? I asked. Who? That's not your concern. He tucked the vial into his robe, secure. Stay in the sect. Don't leave the mountain. I'll find you, if there's anything to find. Like I'm a suspect. Like I'm a flight risk. Like I'm still the villain, just one he's not sure about anymore. Progress. I think. Maybe. He turned to leave. His footsteps echoed on the stone floor, measured, controlled. The light from the window caught his silhouette, the hero, walking away. The hero who wasn't sure anymore. In the novel, he would have arrested me by now, thrown me in the dungeon, started the countdown to my execution. But this isn't the novel. And he's hesitating. Shen Yao. He stopped. Didn't turn. He didn't do it, I said. My voice was quiet. Elder Feng, he didn't poison himself. Someone else did. Someone who has access, who has motive, who has been planning this for a long time. Elder Wu. It's Elder Wu. I know it, but I can't prove it. Not yet, and I can't tell Shen Yao how I know. I can't tell him I read the book. I can't tell him I know things I shouldn't know. I know, he said. What? He turned his head, just slightly. I could see the edge of his jaw, the tension in his profile. I know it's not you, he said. Not entirely. Something's different. I don't know what, but it's different. Then he walked away. I stood in the corridor, alone, the empty space where the vial had been feeling heavier than it should. He said he knew. He said it was different. He didn't say he believed me. He didn't say he trusted me. But he took the vial. He said he'd analyze it. He said he knew something was different. That's more than the novel ever gave me. That's more than I ever expected. Small victories. Tiny, fragile, dangerous victories. Now I wait. I walked back to my chambers in the dark. The sect was quiet at this hour, the disciples in their quarters, the elders in their halls, everyone asleep or pretending to be. My footsteps were the only sound. My thoughts were the only company. He didn't say he believed me. He also didn't say he didn't. That's the thing about Shen Yao. In the book, he was always certain, always right, always the hero who saw through the villain's tricks. But here, now, he's uncertain. He's confused. He's looking at me and seeing someone who doesn't match the file. Someone who investigates instead of accuses. Someone who hands over evidence instead of weaponizing it. Someone who might actually be innocent, or at least not guilty the way he thought. In Ep 16, he won't draw his sword against me. In Ep 20, he'll say, I know, this is where it starts. This is the first crack. The first thread of the trust arc that will tie us together, loosely, uneasily, with plenty of room for betrayal. But for now, I have nothing but a borrowed vial, and a hero who isn't sure what to believe. Elder Wu is still out there. Still calm. Still untouchable. Still 3 lines in the novel, and I'm the only one who knows he's the real villain. Shen Yao has the vial. He'll analyze it. He'll find something, I don't know what, something that confirms the poison was deliberate, something that points to a second party, something that doesn't clear me but doesn't condemn me either. And then what? Then I keep investigating. Then I keep asking questions. Then I keep looking for the thread that ties Elder Wu to the poisoning, the thread that will save Elder Feng, the thread that will save me. One step at a time. One small victory at a time. Tonight, I bought myself something. A chance. A sliver of doubt in the hero's mind. Tomorrow, I find out what it's worth. In the corridor, in the dark, I let myself feel it. The tiny, terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, I'm not going to die in this chapter. In this compilation. In this story that was never supposed to be mine. It's a dangerous feeling. Hope. In a story where I'm supposed to be the villain, but I'm not the villain. I'm just the person who got stuck in her body, and I'm trying very hard not to die. That has to count for something, right? right? The corridor stretched ahead of me, dark and cold and endless. Behind me, somewhere in the sect, Shen Yao was examining a vial that might change everything. Ahead of me, somewhere in the shadows, Elder Wu was watching, waiting, planning. I can't see him. I can't prove it. Not yet. But I know he's there. And I know that sooner or later we're going to have a conversation. The real conversation. The one the novel never wrote. The question is, who will be left standing when it happens? I've got 37 chapters left to find out. Shen Yao arrived at the main hall before dawn. I knew he would. That was the thing about heroes in novels. They never slept when there was justice to be served. They were allergic to rest, constitutionally incapable of waiting until a reasonable hour. The sun could be rising, the birds could be singing, and Shen Yao would still show up at your door at 4 a.m. with evidence that would ruin your life. Or save it, depending on what he found in that vial. You analyzed it, I said. Not a question. He stood in the doorway, backlit by the pale grey of early morning. His face was unreadable, that infuriating hero mask, the one the novel described as stern but fair, which in my experience meant stern and also judging you. I analyzed it, he confirmed. Okay. He's not saying anything else. This is bad. This is very bad. In the book, when someone analyzes poison and doesn't immediately explain the results, it means they found something they didn't expect. Something that doesn't fit the narrative. Something that Yan Bei, there it was. My name in his mouth. The name I was borrowing from a dead woman, worn by a body that wasn't mine, attached to a reputation I hadn't earned. Focus. He's about to drop something. The compound in the vial, he said slowly, is not the same as the poison in Elder Feng's system. I waited. It's a carrier agent. A base. It amplifies the effect of the primary poison, makes it spread faster through the meridians, makes it harder to detect in its early stages. Oh no. Oh, this is bad. This is very bad. The batch you were accused of delivering, Shen continued, his voice careful, measured, was the primary compound. The fast-acting toxin. But someone with access to the Elder, someone who could administer a second dose after your batch was already in his system, had the carrier agent. I felt my heart, Yan Bei's heart, this body's heart, race in my chest. 2-part poison. In the novel, there was no 2-part poison. There was only Yan Bei's poisoned tea, and Yan Bei was guilty, and the hero was right, and everyone died. That was the story. That was the simple, clean, terrible story. But the novel didn't account for me. And it didn't account for this. Someone else had part 2, I said quietly. Shen Yao looked at me. Really looked at me. Not the way he'd looked at me before, with suspicion, with contempt, with the righteous certainty of a hero who knew the villain was guilty. He looked at me like I was a puzzle, a problem, a variable that didn't fit the equation. Someone else had part 2, he agreed. And you, the person who delivered the first batch, you didn't know. I didn't know. In the original story, Yan Bei knew everything. Yan Bei was the mastermind. Yan Bei coordinated with external allies and poisoned the Elder systematically and had a whole network of evil doing. But I'm not Yan Bei. I'm Wei Lan. I'm the person who woke up in this body and immediately started panicking. I'm the person who has been running around trying to save everyone's life, while half the sect wants me dead. I didn't know about the carrier agent. I didn't know about part 2. I didn't know there was a second poisoner, and now Shen Yao knows that too. How do you know I didn't know? I asked. My voice came out steady. villain mask. I was wearing it without thinking. Cold expression, imperious voice, what everyone sees, but inside I was screaming. Inside I was telling the audience, this is not in the book. This is new. This is a deviation. The chapter clock is about to glitch, I can feel it, because something is happening that was never supposed to happen, and the story doesn't know how to process it anymore. Shen Yao was silent for a long moment. Because if you had known, he said finally, you would have used it differently. You would have had more control over the outcome, more leverage. Oh, he's analyzing me. He's analyzing my behavior. He's comparing the Yan Bei in the file, the cold, calculating Villainess, to the Yan Bei standing in front of him, the one who gave away evidence instead of using it, the one who tried to help the junior disciples, the one who, in Chapter 1, didn't attack Su Mei when she was supposed to, the one who keeps doing things the villain would never do, and he doesn't know what to make of it. Good. Confuse him. Keep him uncertain. That's how I survive. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just got lucky. You don't believe in luck, Shen Yao said. No, I don't. Because luck is what happens when the story decides to be kind, and this story has been anything but kind. The sect elders convened within the hour. I watched them gather, the core elders in their formal robes, the junior disciples standing at attention, the atmosphere thick with tension and the smell of incense. Elder Wu was there, of course. Third seat. Calm, collected, fatherly. He looked exactly like a man with 3 lines in a novel. Respectable, forgettable, completely above suspicion. And he's the one who poisoned Elder Feng. He's the one who has been watching me this whole time, watching me run around trying to solve a puzzle he already solved, watching me fumble for evidence he already has. He's the real villain. And nobody knows. Nobody suspects. I'm the only one who knows, and I can't prove it, yet. The head elder, a severe woman named Elder Qian, all sharp angles and sharper words, stood at the front of the hall. The analysis has revealed a complication, she announced. Understatement of the year. Shen Yao, explain. And he did. He explained it all. The carrier agent, the 2-part compound, the fact that the poison in Elder Feng's system was not the same as the poison in the vials attributed to Yan Bei. He was precise, clinical, fair. That's the thing about Shen Yao. Even when he's trying to destroy you, he's fair. He presents the evidence. He doesn't embellish. He doesn't exaggerate. In the novel, that fairness was what made him so terrifying. He was right about everything. He saw through every trick, but here, now, his fairness is my lifeline. Because the evidence doesn't point to me, not exclusively. The evidence points to a second party. Someone else had access. Someone else administered the carrier agent. Someone else had motive. I looked at Elder Wu. He didn't flinch. He didn't react. He stood there, hands folded, face composed, like a man listening to a weather report. Calm, measured, fatherly. 3 lines in the novel. 3 lines. That's all he got. And yet he's the one who's been doing all of this. The injustice of it was almost funny. Almost, the accused, Elder Qian said, will remain under supervision. But the nature of the poisoning now suggests a more complex scenario. Translation. They're not sure it's me anymore. They're not sure it's anyone in the obvious places. They're going to have to actually investigate. This is good. This is a win. This is the first real evidence that I might survive this chapter, but it's not over. It's not close to over. Elder Wu is still out there, and now he knows that I know something is wrong. Now he knows that Shen Yao is investigating. Now he's going to move. Or maybe he already has. Maybe this is all going according to his plan. Maybe the two-part poison was always meant to be discovered, not to clear me, but to confuse the investigation, to buy time, to keep everyone looking in the wrong direction while he does whatever he's actually planning. I don't know. I can't see him. I can't read him. He's a blank space in the novel, a three-line character who somehow became the main antagonist, and I have no idea what his endgame is. That's the terrifying part. Not the poison, not the tribunal, not even Shen Yao. The terrifying part is that I'm operating in completely uncharted territory. The novel gave me a map, and this is off the map. This is the part where the story breaks, where the author didn't bother to write the details because they didn't matter, and now I'm living in those unwritten spaces, and I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody knows. Not even me. Especially not me. After the session, Su Mei approached me. This was unusual. Su Mei didn't approach me. Su Mei kept her distance, maintained her careful neutrality, played the role of the sweet, innocent female lead who was victimized by the villainess in the original story. But something had changed. Something had been changing for a while now, since Ep 1, since I didn't attack her. Since I started deviating from the script. Wei, she called herself. Yan Bei. She almost called me Wei Lan. Did she know? Did she suspect? Could she see through me the way I can see through her? We need to talk, she said quietly. We do. We really do. Because Su Mei knows something. Su Mei has always known something. In the novel, she was the victim, the sweet girl, the one the hero saved, but I know her real arc. I know what she becomes. And I need to know, is this the same Su Mei? Is she still the good girl? Or is she something else now, something more complicated, something more dangerous? We talked in the garden. It was a cliché. Two women, enemies, or potential enemies, meeting in a moonlit garden to exchange cryptic threats and veiled warnings. Very dramatic, very novel, very much not what I wanted to be doing at 6 a.m. after being awake all night. But here we were. The analysis, Su Mei said. You knew. It wasn't a question. I suspected, I said carefully. Actually, I didn't. I had no idea. I thought the vials were the poison. I thought Yan Bei's batch was the whole story. I thought, I don't know what I thought, that it would be simple, that the puzzle would have a clean solution, that the story would play fair. Ha! As if you suspected, Su Mei repeated. Her voice was soft, gentle. The voice of the novel's female lead, the one everyone loved, the one who could do no wrong. But I knew better. I knew what she became in the later chapters. I knew the darkness behind the sweetness. I knew that Su Mei was not what she appeared to be. Or did I? Did the deviation change her too? Is the Su Mei in front of me the same character from the novel, or is she something new, something unwritten? That's the question, isn't it? When the MC deviates, does everyone else stay the same? Or do they change too? Does the story shift around me, or does it only break? I suspected there was more to it, I said. The poison was too simple, too obvious. A villainess poisoning an elder is textbook. It's what the story wants. That's right. I said it. The story. Su Mei won't understand, but the audience will. I'm talking to them. I'm telling them, this is not how it's supposed to go. The poison was supposed to be my crime. The evidence was supposed to be clear. The hero was supposed to be right. but it's not. And it's not. And he isn't. Su Mei looked at me with those wide, innocent eyes, the ones that hid so much. "You talk strangely," she said. "Do I? Do I talk strangely? Or do I talk like someone who knows the ending and is desperately trying to change it? I talk like someone who has seen this story before, who knows what happens next, who is trying very hard to make sure it doesn't. You wouldn't understand. You can't understand. You're a character. I'm the anomaly. I talk like someone who wants to survive," I said. "Survive what? Everything. This chapter. This compilation. This story. You. Shen Yao. Elder Wu. The whole damn plot that was never supposed to include me. Everything," I said. Su Mei was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, that perfect, serene smile, the one that made everyone in the sect love her, the one that hid whatever she was really thinking. "I want to survive too," she said. "Yeah, I know. That's what scares me, because I know what happens to the people who don't." The chapter clock glitched. I felt it before I saw it, that strange ripple in the narrative, that sense of something shifting. The air in the sect changed. The light changed. Everything changed. Chapter 4. Chapter 4. There it is. The glitch. The deviation. The story breaking. Something is happening that was not in the book. Something is changing. Something is coming, and I'm the only one who knows. Later, after Su Mei left, after the sun had fully risen and the sect was humming with the news of the two-part poison, I stood alone in the garden and thought about what came next. Elder Wu knew. He had to know. The analysis was too specific, the evidence too clear. Someone would investigate. Someone would start asking questions about who had access to Elder Feng, who could have administered the second compound, who had the motive and the opportunity. Shen Yao would investigate. That was his nature. He was the hero. He couldn't leave a mystery unsolved. He would dig, and eventually, inevitably, he would dig in the wrong direction. Or maybe the right direction. Maybe this time he would find Elder Wu. Maybe this time he would see through the calm exterior and the fatherly smile and the 3 lines of novel text. Maybe. But even if he did, even if Shen Yao found the evidence I couldn't find, there was still the matter of the network. The plan said Shui leaves Mountain to contact them, the antagonists' network. The people behind Elder Wu. The ones who were really pulling the strings. This is what happens in Ep 12. This is the cliffhanger. Real poison a glimpse. The threat note, Shui's shadow. The audience sees it, I see it, but the characters don't. It's a setup. A thread. A new open loop to keep them watching. And I have to live through it. I have to live through all of it. 36 chapters left. 36 chapters to solve a mystery that wasn't in the book, to survive a story that wasn't supposed to include me, to find evidence against a man who has been getting away with murder for longer than I can imagine. It's exhausting. It's terrifying. It's actually kind of exciting. No, don't think like that. Don't get hopeful. Hope is dangerous. Hope is how you get killed in a story like this. But still, there's something. Some thread. Some possibility. Elder Wu made a mistake. He used a 2-part poison, and now Shen Yao knows. He didn't account for me, for Wei Lan, for the person inside Yan Bei's body, for the one variable he couldn't predict. And that means he's not invincible. That means he can be caught. That means I might actually survive this. Maybe. Probably not. But maybe. The garden was quiet. The sun was warm, Somewhere in the sect, Elder Wu was watching, waiting, planning. And somewhere in the shadows, his network was moving. EP 12, the threat note. Shui's shadow. The first real glimpse of what I'm up against. I can't wait. Actually, I can. I really can. I don't want to know what's coming, but I will. I always do. That's the thing about being the MC. You don't get to skip the hard chapters. You just have to live through them, one at a time. One cliffhanger at a time. One impossible situation at a time. And hope that somewhere along the way, the story decides to let you live. The paper was cheap. The handwriting was careful. The message was 6 words. Drop the vial. Or else. I stared at it for a very long time. My hand had stopped moving. I'd been reaching for my tea, and then there was this small folded square on the floor just inside my door. And now my tea was getting cold, and I was holding a death threat and thinking, this wasn't in the book. Nothing this week has been in the book. But this feels personal. Let me tell you where I stood the night before the tribunal. My name is Wei Lan. I am inside the body of Yan Mingju, a villainess from a cultivation novel I read on my lunch breaks. She is supposed to poison a beloved elder, get caught, get executed, and spend her final scene weeping and begging for mercy from the male lead, who definitely doesn't give it. I have been in this body for, I've lost count, long enough that I stopped waking up hoping it was a dream. Long enough that I can walk in these robes without tripping. Long enough that I have evidence, a reluctant alliance with the hero I am supposed to die fighting, and a 2-part poison analysis that the novel never mentioned. The novel had 3 lines about Elder Wu. 3. His name in the attendance register, a scene where he looked grave at a funeral, and a background mention in chapter 40-something that I'd barely registered because I was eating a sandwich. He is the poisoner. I know this now. I figured it out. Or rather, I stumbled into it while trying very hard not to die. And now, someone knows I figured it out. And that someone just confirmed their own guilt by sliding this note under my door. 6 words. Not subtle. Definitely afraid. I set the paper down on my writing table, very carefully, like it might bite me. Then I sat on the floor because my legs felt unreliable. Then I picked it up again because leaving evidence on the table seemed like a bad habit to develop. The broken vial was in a box under my sleeping mat. The vial that wasn't in any chapter. The vial that contained compound traces for both parts of the poison. The slow-acting root derivative that Elder Feng ingested over weeks, and the stabilizing agent that would have ensured he never woke up. 2 compounds, 1 source, 1 person with access to the inner elder quarters at the timing required. Shen Yao had confirmed the analysis last night. He hadn't looked happy about it. He never looks happy about anything I hand him, which I understand, because every piece of evidence I produce makes his original theory less coherent and his job more complicated. He's the hero. His job is supposed to be catching the villain, which is me, and watching justice prevail. I keep ruining that for him. I feel a little bad about it. Not enough to stop. The note meant one thing cleanly. Whoever wrote it believed the vial was the only link to them. Which meant they didn't know how much else I'd pieced together. Which meant they were afraid. Afraid people were smart things when they were capable of violence, and had already poisoned 1 elder to death. And Elder Feng was still not dead, which meant they hadn't finished yet. Drop the vial. Or the elder doesn't see morning. Right. So, the tribunal was at dawn. Elder Feng was in the healer's wing, unconscious, slightly more stable than he'd been 3 days ago, but still. 1 bad night away from not making it. I had a vial of evidence. I had a threat. I had roughly 8 hours until the tribunal started, and everything changed. I also had absolutely no plan. As usual. Completely standard for my situation. I got up, paced, sat down, paced again. The room felt smaller than usual. The candle I'd been reading by was burning low, and the shadows at the edges of the walls were thick and soft, and the kind of dark that makes you very aware you are alone. The original Yan Mingju had been threatened before. That was the thing I'd been sitting with since Ep 8, since Mao Lin had told me, carefully, not quite meeting my eyes, that the last time he'd seen her she'd been going toward Elder Feng's quarters. Not running away. Going toward. Like someone walking into something they knew was dangerous. She'd been trying to warn him. The diary's last entry. The way she moved that night, according to the one person in this sect who'd actually watched her without agenda. She hadn't been the poisoner. She'd known about the poisoner, and she'd gone to intervene, and something had gone wrong. And now she was gone and I was here, and the poisoner was still walking these halls, with his calm expression and his 3 lines of novel text. He threatened her too. That's what I think. That's what the evidence keeps pointing at, if I'm reading it right. Drop the vial, same words, maybe. Same pressure. She didn't drop whatever she was carrying. And then she was just gone. I sat with that for a while. The candle burned lower. There was a soft sound at my window, wind probably, the kind that comes off the mountain at this hour. And I didn't look up because I was thinking, and because there was nothing to see in the dark. I should have looked up. I know that now. I should have looked. Here is the thing about knowing the plot of your own story. You read a book, you think, I would have caught that. I would have seen the signs. The villain was obvious. The clues were right there. The narrative telegraphed the twist from chapter 3. Readers are always smarter than characters. That's the deal. Except you're not reading anymore. You are in it. And the candle is low, and someone has threatened your life, and the elder, who is the only living witness to any of this, is unconscious in the healer's wing, and you have 6 words on cheap paper and a vial of poison compounds, and the tribunal starts in 8 hours. And the thing I kept coming back to, the thing that made the floor feel unstable under me, was this: the book had no tribunal. None of this happened. In the novel, Yan Mingju was caught and condemned in maybe a chapter and a half of clean, uncomplicated narrative justice. There was no 2-part poison, no broken vial, no Mao Lin as a witness, no Shen Yao looking at evidence with that careful expression that means he is fundamentally uncertain about something he was certain about yesterday. I changed the story. I didn't mean to, and I keep not meaning to, but the story is different now because I'm in it, which meant Elder Wu had a plan for a version of this story that no longer existed. His plan accounted for a tribunal, where the evidence pointed at Yan Mingju, and only at Yan Mingju. His plan did not account for compound analysis, or an alibi, or a servant willing to testify, or a vial that shouldn't exist. He was improvising. Just like me, we are both improvising. That's actually terrifying. I thought I was the only one flying blind. But he's adjusting too. The note is proof. The note is panic in 6 words. I folded the note very carefully and put it inside the box with the vial. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. Mao Lin had said, when I'd recruited him, that he'd watched the original Yan Mingju for years. Bitter about it, she'd dismissed him, ignored him, treated him the way she treated everything that didn't serve her directly. He'd watched with the particular attention of someone who expects to be overlooked, which meant he'd seen things other people hadn't. He'd seen her go toward Elder Feng's quarters, the night before she disappeared. He'd seen her face, and he'd said, in that rough way he has, that she didn't look like someone going to do something terrible. She looked like someone going to stop something terrible. She knew. She went to warn him, and someone stopped her. 6 words, cheap paper, careful handwriting. The same threat, sent twice. He's done this before. He knows it works. The candle went out. I sat in the dark for a moment, heart doing something complicated in my chest. Then I found the flint on my table by feel and lit the candle again, hands only slightly unsteady. Not going to work this time. Just for the record, I am not the original Yan Mingju. I don't have the nobility or the tragic arc or whatever made her walk quietly toward danger. I have survival instinct and a genre reader's understanding of story mechanics, and I am not going to die off-page before the tribunal. Probably. Definitely probably. I picked up my brush, started writing, not the novel's version, not the chapter-by-chapter scaffolding I'd been relying on. My own notes. What I knew, what I suspected, what the evidence pointed toward. The kind of notes that would make sense to Shen Yao in the morning, organized for a person who thinks in evidence chains and not in narrative arcs. If something happened to me tonight, at least he'd have it. At least, the thread wouldn't die with me. That is either very heroic or extremely depressing. I genuinely can't tell which. I was still writing when I heard it. Not a sound, exactly. More like the quality of the silence outside my window changed, the way a room gets heavier when someone enters it. I'd been in enough politically dangerous situations in the past weeks to have developed, entirely against my will, a sensitivity to that particular shift. I kept writing, didn't look up, made my hand stay steady on the brush. The shadow passed my window. Just for a moment, the kind of movement that registers at the edge of vision, there and gone before you can be sure you saw it. A shape, a silhouette, someone walking with the deliberate, unhurried pace of a person who has nowhere to hide because he doesn't believe he needs to. I know that walk. I've seen it in daylight, in the corridors of the outer elder wing, in the formal convening hall where he sits 3 seats from the head of the tribunal. Calm, measured, unhurried. I didn't see it. I was writing. My eyes were on the paper. But you saw it, didn't you? You're watching this, and you saw him, Elder Wu, walking the perimeter of the junior disciples' quarters, alone, at this hour, the night before the tribunal. Checking, making sure his note landed, making sure the variable was contained, and I was right there. Candle lit, back to the window, completely embarrassingly unaware. The silence outside settled back to normal. Crickets, wind, the distant sound of a night watch bell from the outer gate. I finished the sentence I was writing, set down the brush, looked at what I'd produced, 3 pages of careful, organized suspicion laid out for a man who doesn't trust me and has every reason not to. The vial was still in the box. The note was with it. The tribunal was in 8 hours. In the book, this is where Yan Mingju runs. This is where the evidence disappears, and the story closes around her, and the ending is already written. I'm not running. I want to be very clear about that. I am absolutely terrified, and I am not running, but I am going to need to think very carefully about what comes next. Because Elder Wu walked past my window tonight, and I didn't see him, and the fact that he came to check means he is not as calm as he appears, and a frightened man who has already poisoned one person is considerably more dangerous than a calm one. The tribunal starts at dawn. The vial stays in the box. And somewhere out there, in the dark beyond my window, The man with 3 lines of novel text is deciding whether 6 words were enough, or whether he needs to do something more permanent before morning.